Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So today we're taking a look at Endless Winter, and no, we're not going to have any jokes about the link between Endless and the Kickstarter fulfillment lately. Yes, the Kickstarter is only just fulfilling to backers, but this is the retail version, which has been available since around Essen time in early October. And I'm reviewing the retail version only because I don't want to review stuff with a bunch of deluxe add-ons and that. So everything you see here is purely retail box. Yes, I do have the Kickstarter version, but that's a separate story. Here, I'm more interested in what you can buy in the store at its lowest price point, and whether for that kind of money, you get your money's worth.
Merchandising.
So in Endless Winter, you all play a Paleoamerican tribe. The idea is that you are developing this tribe over 4 rounds in the game, and of course, the one with the most victory points.
Of course!
Get that out of the way quick. And basically what you're doing is a mix of, well, pretty much every Euro mechanic you can find, really. I mean, you have action selection, you have deck building, you have, little spatial puzzles, you have area control, you name it, it's kind of in this game. Like, literally, I'm surprised there's no trick-taking mini-module in this, but more on that later. But the idea is what you have is you have your own player board with pieces such as buildings, temples, and various things to put on the board and uncover special bonuses. But you essentially have 2 workers as well as a particular leader character that you'll have. And then there are 4 actions on the board for collecting more cards, for going on to a tile map where you can control different hexes for bonuses, but also where you can grab sacred stones, which are effectively like a mini, kind of like, not end game, but interim round objectives for scoring. But you can also grab animal cards, which are these lovely small cards with lots of, well, I was about to say cute animals. I don't know if a woolly mammoth is considered cute, or a saber-toothed cat. Maybe a ground sloth, do you find them cute? And I have no idea what a glyptodon is, but apparently it exists, and it is about far from the cutest thing I have ever seen. Let's put it that way. But you essentially have 3 workers to place on these 4 actions. Placing it on the action first in the round will give you a special bonus, but otherwise it's not worker placement, so people do not block each other off these spaces. It's just a case of, well, you know what, right now I need to go do this action. I go there, resolve it from top to bottom, and they allow you to do various things and get various bonuses. Once the round is, well, all these actions, let's start on that first. The actions themselves key off cards. So you start off with a basic deck of cards which relate to various characters. The characters all have a labor symbol on them, which is one of the currencies for performing actions, but then you also have to mitigate your tools and food, which represent more things that you might have to pay for the various actions. But it's kind of like a mini deck builder. You'll only have so many in your hand to begin with, but you'll be able to acquire more, and there are various characters in the games, like a shaman, like elders, crafters, pathfinders, hunters, and that's just the base. That's just the retail copy. Trust me, if you get the Kickstarter one, you get even more. But the idea is that these characters can upgrade your deck, but during the game you'll be able to bury cards, aka trash them, out of your deck in order to thin your deck and fill it with much better things. But some of these characters have abilities when you play them, but mainly they are used to parry actions. Once you've done your 3 actions, you then have the ability to play some of these cards in what's called an Eclipse phase. You put them above your board, and then after everybody's done their actions for the turn, there is a kind of like an interim pause of the game where the cards in your Eclipse pile flip over, and you resolve any Eclipse abilities on them, which is kind of similar to what Dune Imperium does with the banner at the bottom, where in the combat phase you have some stuff for cards you kept in your hand. This is similar, it's just that you're leaving it for effectively the Eclipse nighttime phase. But what you also are doing is totaling up the labor value of all the cards in your Eclipse pile for the purposes of turn order and other bonuses. And that's kind of a summarized view of how a round goes. You rinse and repeat this for 4 rounds. It is an engine builder, so things get more powerful as you go along. More on that in some detail later. But of course, once you've done the 4 rounds, you total up all the victory points, have a little bit of endgame scoring, and of course, alright, let's bring it back, the one with the most.
Of course!
So production quality, considering this is essentially the first major game I noticed from Fantasia Games, I'm pretty impressed with what they've done from a retail edition standpoint. You can buy this for around the £50 mark once it comes out for proper release in the UK, but for that kind of money, you get some pretty decent stuff here. I mean, you've got a few miniatures, which granted have no wash or anything on them, but frankly, they still look great. You've got a bunch of tiles in the game for the maps with, you know, different color artwork and different symbology on them. You've got all these cards.
What the deuce?
Sorry, move out of the way, Yoda. You know, all these different cards for culture cards, which I didn't mention before, are essentially like another type of card you can play during the game for bonuses. But you've got all these different characters that you can acquire, all the different animals. You have a special insert to hold most of it. Every player has their own little tray, so game trays effectively, where you can easily hold your villages or your little pieces, the megalith tiles, all these boards, the rulebooks partially linen finished, the player boards are dual layers, so you can put things in them and they don't fall off. Wow, for £50, this is pretty good. This is pretty solid. And that's before you even get to the artwork, which is gorgeous. I like this man's artwork. The Mico is the artist for this, and every card in here looks great. I get that it's a unique style and some people are slightly put off by the Mico style, but honestly, I think the Mico style is great, and I think it really suits this game. Every board, every card, everything that is in this game looks clean, crisp, and colourful yet still. I mean, I love the fact that the Mico artwork just seems to blend, sort of, well, not blend, contrast, I think is a better word, like very nicely with the blue and white ice look. So you've got that stark background, but then with the colourful art of the Mico, and I just think it works. You know, even your starter cards look pretty cool. There's some recycled artwork here and there, but everybody's got their own unique tribe technically, so there are subtle differences between the cards. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to look at. There isn't really anything I would consider to be a bad component. Even the cubes to track your food are at least big and translucent. I mean, that's the cube, and they can still do a good job on that. Honestly, yeah, nothing in this game is bad from a production standpoint, and especially for the retail version, for around £50, I've seen a lot worse production for more money than that, trust me. The instructions and rule for the game as well are pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got a nice inset diagram to show you how to store everything, how to put it in a box, which, again, all very good when they put these in these games. You've got a separate book for the solo mode. We'll get onto that in the next video I do for this. But you've got the rule book for Endless Winter itself. And I find that the rules in here are pretty clear cut. They're pretty easy to understand. I think Paul Grogan had a hand in this as well. But the iconography in this is all on the back of the book. Would I like a reference sheet per person? A little bit, but the fact that it's on the back is good enough. At least they put the reference aid somewhere. And honestly, this is pretty much every icon you get in the game, so if you know this off by hand, you'll be able to pick things up pretty straightforward. But what Endless Winter is kind of like a lot of moving parts that don't necessarily link well together. So that's not a bad thing per se, but it does mean that when the rules teach, there is quite a lot of overhead in getting it across to the players. You can't just jump into this and see what happens. You need to get this stuff explained, and so once you've explained how cards work, you then need to understand, bro, how do the culture cards work? Alright, so how does area control with the tiles work? You know, because there's a whole raft of rules to deal with this side of things. And then you've got, alright, well, what do I do with these megalith tiles then? How do they work? Well, that's a whole different puzzle in itself with these tiles. And the animals, right, well, that's a whole different category in itself. There's a lot of things to juggle, but rather than juggling 3 balls at once, you're kind of juggling 6 or 7. And because they don't interlink quite as much as they could, it just makes the teach a little bit arduous, a little bit long, but the rules themselves are not overly complex. This isn't what I would call like the really heavy style games like the Surters or anything like that. But to call this midweight might not be, like, it might be underselling it a little bit, because with the amount of rules that are included, there is certainly a lot going on. There is certainly a lot that you gotta keep track of and deal with, a lot of bonuses going through. So, yeah, heavy, it's one or two. I think it's kind of on the low side of heavy, I would say. This isn't really a game I would want to throw in front of most people. There are some people who have, like, you know, gotten like a house on fire with this, particularly if they're used to games like, say, Lost Ruins of Arnak or even Dune Imperium, like I mentioned before. But if they're quite new to games and really only into light stuff, this might overwhelm them a bit with the amount of options that they have.
I was frozen today!
That being said, For gamers particularly, the rules are not particularly difficult to comprehend. There's just a bit of overhead for your first game.
I don't get it.
And certainly with your first game, you better be prepared to sit here for a while because, whoo-wee, game's a long one. 60 to 120 minutes is what is quoted on the box. This is assuming that you don't set up the game ever and that you know the rules already. If you've got to teach this and you've got new players, 4-player games are going to take you 3 hours. Easily. They will easily hit that 3-hour mark. And that's not even necessarily including the setup. The setup for this is a bit of a chore, it has to be said. And you might think, well, hang on, I've got 2 trays here and a few things. It can't be that hard to set up, can it? Yeah. Everybody's got their own tray full of stuff, yes, but then you need to set up an animal board with the various cards, alright? You need to set up various things on your own player board. You need to arrange the megalith tiles in a particular fashion, depending on player count. You need to organise a bunch of tiles with some glacier, one of each different colour, and then a bunch of randoms, again, depending on player count. Get them on the board in a big hexagon fashion. Then you got to set up the idle board with your pawns and that on there. Then you've got the main board. You got to get sacred stones at the top based on player count. You got to get your pieces on the turn or the track, your point markers. Then you've got to sort out the cards. All right, well now I need all the people cards. I need to set out a display of culture cards. Everybody needs their starter cards. There's a specific hand. There's a specific setup card to help people with like starting resources based on turn order. There's the animal cards themselves. Oh my god. The setup for this is long and quite arduous. If you've got 4 of you that know exactly what you're doing, then great, people can help out. But if I'm the one teaching this game and nobody else has seen this before, I'm losing the will to live by the time I get this set up. It's a lot. A lot of the time is going to be spent setting this up. You want this done in advance. You cannot set this game up quick. It's physically impossible. And if somebody tells you how long a game is likely to take and they haven't got it out of the box, you might want to throw a little bit of caution to the wind and just ask them, how long is it really going to take to play this game? Now, with 2 free players, 2 hours should easily be doable, even with the setup, I think, actually. But 60 minutes... with 2 players, if you know what you're doing and the game's already set up. There is no way a 2-player game of this is handling the setup, teach, and all that in 60 minutes. It's just not happening. Solo mode, though, can be done in 60 minutes, but we'll get onto that in a different video. So, yeah, quite on the lengthy side, be warned. So in terms of the gameplay, there's a lot of good stuff to say about this. Not perfect, but there's a lot of good stuff. The fact that there is a lot of different moving parts of this game means that there's a lot of options of what you can do. Do I want to focus on this map board over here and get camps out? Well, I can. They get you cool bonuses in the Eclipse phase. But then I might be like, you know what, I just want to get a big deck full of cool characters, in which case I'm going to start harvesting these like crazy. But, there's a lot of different paths that you can take. But on top of that, I enjoy a lot of the mechanics that go around this game. The area control with the tiles, we've seen that before. That's fine, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. The animal cards are quite cool because I like the idea that you've got the different types and categories of these, but you can either hold on to them until the end of the game for victory points, or you can kill them off during the game and get food and various other bonuses with them. So there's a cool, you could approach animals in 2 different ways just by that one alone. I always like going for the animals as a strategy. It's one of my favourite ways to play. But then the culture cards are really cool. These special cards that give you a bonus at the start of your turn when you play them. It's cool to grab a few of these because they are pretty funky effects, but they're not the cheapest thing to acquire. And of course, you've just got that whole thing of resource management with your board. I've got to track food and tools, of which food is easier to come by than tools by a long shot. Tools are really hard to come by for the fact that I would actually say that if you see a culture card that gives you a bunch of tools, grab it ASAP. It's kind of not quite broken, but it really is good getting a lot of tools. And so anything that gets you tools is like diamond. It's like saffron in this game. It's like you want a lot of it and there ain't much of it. But having to juggle around your resources and, uncovering stuff with your board, it's fulfilling, it's rewarding, and much like an engine builder, it is certainly one that gets more powerful as the game goes on. Quite powerful, in fact. A little too powerful. I was using the term before which doesn't quite work, which is the idea that this thing snowballs so fast it falls off the cliff. It's not that you have more action that you're triggering on your turn. You still only have 3 workers. You still only have 1, 2, or 3 things that you do on each action when you do it. So it's not quite that the engine snowballs out of control, but the power of the engine goes to ridiculous levels way too quickly. I start off with this rubbish little engine that's just chugging along, fine. Alright, well let me just try and, let's just change the oil and push this button here. Then suddenly the engine can travel through hyperspace. Go! The start of the game, like the first round particularly, possibly the second, feels relatively tight. You only have so many things that you can do on your turn, you've only got a limited supply of the cards, and so you're really making that cool decision between, do I want to spend the cards for the labour or should I spend a bit of food? But if I've got the food, can I get food? Well, I can if I kill an animal later. But I'm really only all these tools. I need one to build the sacred stone. What am I going to do with these things? That's the first round. By the time you get to round 3, you have a ton of stuff available to you. You're unlocking bonuses everywhere. You're getting loads of stuff to the point where you can kind of achieve anything you want to do and then some. By the time the 4th round comes along, bear in mind this is only a 4-round game, I feel like if Superman came down and gave me some hassle, I'd be able to take him out in a few hits.
Damn, I'm possessed. Wonder if I can play the accordion too.
Your engine gets too powerful in round 4, where I find that I can do pretty much anything I like just by random Eclipse bonuses, and whatever else I do I end up leveling to the top on the idle track on both sides, and I wasn't even aiming for it. I end up with so many cards in my deck that I don't care what they are, they're just worth a single point, and it reduces the amount of differentiation between players, but it also makes the stuff that you did in round 1 and 2 feel a little bit, well, pointless, because what was the idea of me focusing on a particular aspect of the game if by the end of the game I can kind of do everything anyway? Yeah, there'll be maybe one aspect of the game that you really don't do a lot. Like I might ignore the camps for the whole game and just focus on animals and cards. But because of the bonuses I get from all that, I'm able to still level up to the top of pretty much both these idle tracks and still do a decent amount of the culture cards. Yes, I don't necessarily do much on that track, but I've done pretty much everything else. And the last couple of turns, you end up finding yourself in a position where you might think, well, what can I do? I mean, I've already done everything I need to do with the camps. I've already got all the animals I need. What else do I really do? I guess I'll just grab a couple of cards here. Here you go. I'll grab which cards do I want? I don't know. They're worth a point. Who cares? I'll just grab 2 shamans and shove them in my discard pile. And that's not a feeling I want when the engine gets to its fullest. I want the engine to be running, but I also want it to do meaningful things. I also want it to still not be something I can exploit or take advantage of or take for granted. Compare this with something like, best comparison for this game I can think of is Lost Ruins of Arnak. Now, that's worker placement. This isn't quite worker placement, but you still only have 3 workers here, effectively. You only have 2 in the other one, plus other actions. But in Lost Ruins of Arnak, you only have 5 rounds or so, and by the time you get to the end, your engine has built up. But even in the last round, I don't feel like I can take on the world. There are going to be aspects of the game that I will not have touched by the time I get to the end, especially if I focused hard on something like exploration or research. I still have to be careful with what I do in case I paint myself into a corner and go, whoops, I don't have enough compasses to do that. How do I do that now? That is why Arnak is like a 10 out of 10. Love it for me. This one, on the other hand, gets to round 4 and it's like, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know, anything. Whatever I want to do, I can do because it's super simple because you have the whole world of resources at your disposal to do it with. It just doesn't feel that fulfilling. Like, by the time I get to the end of round 3, I feel like I'm kind of done because I know that round 4 is just going to be rinse, repeat. I've got tons of stuff. Let's just play it and grab a few points here and there. So, whereas in the first couple of rounds, that every point you get feels like, right, that was meaningful. These points mattered. By the time you get into round 4, and even to the extent at the end of round 3, every point you get just feels like I'm doing it for the sake of getting points. I would like it to have been a bit tighter in that late game. There is one aspect that I do feel like, okay, we could have streamlined this out. Why is this even in the game? I love the cards. I love the animals. I like the area control just fine. I like the sacred stones fine. The bit I'm not as keen on though are these things. The megalith tiles. This is when you sort of get to that point where you feel like the people who made this game are like, alright, we've got everything, I feel that we've got everything we need to have in this game, but no, we must have more stuff. Let's put in more. Eurogamers want more. It's like, yeah, that does seem to be the mentality. Throw every Euro mechanic you can into the game, regardless of whether it even should be in there.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
And for me, my weak link is the megaliths. I'm not a fan of this mechanic at all. You have 4 of these tiles, you lay them out at the start of the game. I laugh the fact that it gives you different setups for these because frankly, as far as you will tell when you play the game, it makes sod all difference. I know there's people out there who have done statistical analysis of the different setups and going, oh, it slightly changes aspects in this regard. Who the hell cares? Seriously, get out more. But, you know, you basically just go, right, here's my little spatial puzzle here. They've got bonuses on them, and then if you get a megalith symbol, you put out your grey ones first on the bonus spaces on whichever one of the 4 you want to do. Cool, I'll put one there, put one there. This gets me bonuses, it gets me cards, it gets me food, it gets me tools, it gets me idle movement, and that's all the megalith is. Basically just a spatial bonus thing. And the idea is that when you get enough tiles in a square, effectively, like 2x2 square, you can instead put a megalith on top and it gets you points based on what colour thing is underneath it. It is the most, it feels like the most tacked on mechanical aspect of this game. You get the idea of these characters, you get the idea of the animals and killing them off for food. The area control makes sense, particularly if you're warfaring tribes. This whole thing, I get that there was probably megaliths and stuff in those days, but this just feels really arbitrary. Not pointless. Trust me, if you focus on megaliths, you can get yourself some pretty nice bonuses. It's not like it's a wasted thing if you go for it in a game, but you could ignore it entirely and still do really well at this. But it just feels like, oh, it's another thing I gotta teach. It's like, right, okay, so let me teach you these. Right, so you've got these megalith tiles. They're on your board, they uncover more stuff. Right, so the first one you put down the bonus space. But because you've got 2 grey ones, you then have to put the second one out, which is a bonus next door to it. Why that's in the game, I don't know. Why don't you just make them all your colour and simply highlight 4 squares as starter spaces with a bonus on them or whatever, and then just say, right, you only put out 1 colour on that starting space. This whole thing of you've got 2 greys and then you put out a grey and then another grey, it's just weird. Every time I explain it, I always get a few confused looks from people because it just doesn't seem to make sense. It's like you could have streamlined that that could have been so much more streamlined, and yet it's just weird. But then all this is just put stuff out and get bonuses. If you took out the megaliths from this game, I feel like you would lose nothing. You could just make the game about the cards, the area control, and that's it. Not have these megaliths, find something else to put on the bottom of your board, you know, maybe more, I don't know, just anything else. I mean, that's all it is. It's just one track down there, but anything could have been better. I mean, in the Kickstarter version, there's actually a little mini module called Canine Familiars. You every time you rest, you get to take canine cards, like dog cards in your hand, and use them as normal cards. Why not have that in this game? It makes more thematic sense, it's easier to teach, and it doesn't feel like some mechanical tacked on thing, because what would you rather have? Some arbitrary thing that you just arrange in whatever formation you like, with a bunch of like, ooh, I can create a 2x2 square and then put a little tile on it. Sounds like a Feld game, doesn't it? But, yeah, it does actually feel very Feld-like, this part. But would you rather have that, or cool artwork cards with cute dogs on them? I know which one I prefer. So it's, I don't know, it's not something to really harp too much on, but I do find that this kind of illustrates one point that I feel like the game probably has too many moving parts in some respects. And it's just like, if you took this out, I think you would have had a perfect blend of mechanics with the feet and everything else. This just feels a bit tacked on. Most of the time I ignore it, but it's there, you gotta teach it, you can't just strip it out.
There'll be plenty of time to discuss your objections when and if you return.
So Endless Winter is a solid game, and it definitely has more positives than negatives, but the negatives are still a thing. Positively, yeah, the production quality on this is stellar. For a £50 game, everything looks great, the artwork's fantastic, and the production quality, there's nothing in this game that I would say is cheap, chintzy, and horrible. Literally the only minor thing is that it's a little difficult getting the lid on this tray here because you need to have these miniatures in the exact spot, and it doesn't tell you which spot they're meant to go in. But the rulebook's really good, it's, you know, decent, easy enough to understand, and the iconography, really good graphic design as well, so there's a lot of good stuff in that department. The feel of the game is also fun. You've got a lot of different things to juggle. I love the card deck manipulation. I like these animals for set collection, or kill them off or keep them. I don't know, you know, which one am I going to do? The area control is still good fun and quite simple. So, and it's always like fulfilling to get stuff off your board and reveal the bonuses underneath. And of course, I know, as much as I give Dune Imperium a bit of flack for being overrated you can check out my video on that one, but you know, I do at least like that idea that you can keep cards back and use them in like another phase. And it's the same thing with here, that decision between, well, am I going to keep this card and play it now, or should I spend the food, or keep it for the Eclipse phase? All really good stuff. And even the rest action. You might think, well, rest action, well, that just sounds like a wasted action. No, that rest action can be really good for depending what you're doing, so do not underestimate it. But yeah, a lot of cool things and a lot of different paths. But those paths then blend into the same thing at the end, which then kind of makes you feel, well, what was the point in picking a path if I can pretty much take on Superman and do everything in the game by the time you get to the end? 4 players is long, the setup is long, but I still enjoy my time overall with this game. So there are some negatives to bear in mind, and those negatives are big enough to take this out of distinction level territory. I'm sorry, it just can't make that with the problems that I do have with the game. But it is still really solid, and I'm definitely up for playing this if it's on the table, particularly if you have only got 2 or 3 of you, and or 4 of you, if everybody knows what they're doing. So I gotta give props where it's due. It's still a good, fun game, particularly for this price point. I'm giving it overall an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10, a great game, but those negatives will take it out of the distinction level section. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. I know a lot of people are putting this as 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s. I feel like there's a few things we're overlooking here, but again, I think it depends on what you think about that whole aspect of the last round kind of being a little bit too powerful for the players. If you love that, if you want to feel like God when you get to the last round, then great, do so. For me, I kind of just wanted a little bit more differentiation in that department. It's like, if I chose to focus on animals, then let me be the one with the most animals and, like, a ton of stuff there. Don't let other people just catch up easily just by the fact that they get so many bonuses. They're just grabbing animals for the sake of grabbing animals. It irks me, and the megaliths, yes, I wish that was taken out of the game. It's such a mechanical, arbitrary thing that's thrown in. It could have streamlined things a bit here and there. It's definitely got the hallmarks of first Kickstarter syndrome, I think, with some of its design, but overall, I still really enjoy its mechanics. I still love the way it looks. I love the smoothness of, like the graphic design and how each action plays out. It's just the fact that the turn's going to take a while at some point. You got to bear that in mind. And of course, you throw in anything with a little mini deck building element, and it's certainly going to, score some points with me, because I do, when these are done right, note to an Imperium, when they're done right, it's still good fun. So 8 out of 10 for me. Great game, just not quite at the distinction level, but still definitely worth taking a look, especially if you're into having all the kitchen sink Euro mechanics. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple video, which will be me looking at the solo mode for this. The solo mode has a unique, different AI and a different style of play, so I'll give you my thoughts as to whether that is better than multiplayer or about the same or worse in the next video. Until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including the Big Bonanza review trilogy that I did recently, where I had to go through a massive pile of games to try and catch up before Christmas, and I've gone through a lot of, not so well heard of titles, and I definitely urge people to give those ones a look. Take care, and remember, as always, regardless of whether you're going to slay the giant woolly mammoth, it's still only a game. Bye for now.
I was frozen today!